Welcome to everyone who's able to join us here live and watching the recording afterwards. Very happy to have you with us today for our February Nonprofit Executives Council meeting. And we're very happy to have Jason Comstock. He's the president and CEO of Clarity Technology Solutions, who's been a chamber member partner with ours for many years. Today to talk to us kind of about what's the latest in cybersecurity, which is of course an ongoing topic and certainly something that every nonprofit, no matter what size, should be concerned about, and cybersecurity is always changing, and I'm glad to have Jason here and his expertise to talk more about that subject. And with that, I think, Jason, I'll have you take us away here.
Okay. Well, so I do have some slides that I'll use really as guides for what we're talking about here, but I want to make sure that I cover topics that are of specific interest to you or challenges that you're seeing in your organization to make sure we talk through those as well. Is there anything you'd like to add to the list?
Could we do brief introductions? I know Cheryl, but this is my first time I've met everybody else. Thank you.
Sure. Kathy, you're at the top of the list, so I'll let you go first.
I'm Kathy Wink. I'm with Marion Goodwill Industries.
Yes, I'm Raymond Cyrus. I'm actually a business coach for the Marion area.
Okay.
I am Cheryl Custer. I'm with Developmental Disability Board.
Great.
I'm Glenn Tibbetts. I'm with United Church Homes. I'm the corporate director of IT and HIPAA security officer.
Oh, you get to live in this space all day long.
Yes, I do.
Whew. Wow. Yeah, we got a lot of fun things to be talking about here.
That's right.
Jason, you asked for an additional, and I think you and I briefly mentioned this, but and I don't know if it's going to be covered, but one of the angles I did want to see if there's time to talk about would be now that, of course, a lot of nonprofits aren't able to have in-person events. A lot of the way they're able to touch and reach out to potential funders or just the people that they work with is via email. And kind of what are some ways that our nonprofit members can get through to folks through spam filters, through like, is there tips or tricks that related to well, security on the other side of when they're sending things out to their constituents, I guess.
Yeah, so well, let's address that question up front, and then we can roll through this as well. So typically with email, what you're running into is your emails are scored. So depending on what service you use, be it Office 365, Mail Protector, or all the other platforms that are out there, they're looking for certain traits in an email to say, is this a good email or a bad email? They're going to look for things such as links, where it's being sent from. Does it have an address that's on the inside of the network, but it's coming from the outside from somewhere else? And those are the kind of triggers that people are going to look at. Or systems are going to look at, because we have to use tools to be able to filter all this stuff. There's just way too much information that comes in. Now, the organization itself may apply more stringent policies, data level protection policies to protect information going in and out. So, for example, we've been turning the knobs up for our clients just on some best practices that we're seeing these days. And one of the filters that you can apply is looking for bank account and tax ID type information. Well, for certain things that they do, they need to be able to transmit that securely through their email system. And it was getting caught up in the filters where those messages were getting dropped. So we had to go make some tweaks, understand the risk, and move from there. And it's really about risk mitigation is everything we do. We can make it so secure, it'll be great, but it won't work. Availability, it goes away. So we have to find that balance there. Now, coming back to your email question. So using tools like a constant contact versus just using your email system will give you a better ratio of opens and pass-throughs than just trying to blast out a bunch from your email. So it's really being cautious on the content, looking at the links that you're putting in, sender validation. There's some other things, checks that are done. But if you try to make it a very jam-packed email, the probability of it getting caught goes up.
Is there still like buzzword on subject lines or using exclamation marks, is that still a thing that can trigger a spam
I'm
filter?
sure there are so many triggers, and those trigger lists continue to change just based on what all the email vendors are seeing. So I know we're a big Office 365 shop. So what we run into is Microsoft has a global set of policies. Anything that's touching their gateway is always going to go through that global set of policies. And that changes based on what the threats of the day are. So a message that got through last week won't get through this week because some threat's been associated to that. And then we apply controls above and beyond that based on different policies. If there's regulatory things that have to be applied, such as GLBH or HIPAA related issues, those add additional filters. So the party that you're sending to could have additional requirements for mail that's coming in that may block things that would pass through to some folks, but not others. It is very much an art. It's probably the best way to describe it. So that's where on the back end, having users take a look at those quarantine reports. We set it up for our clients where every day they get the quarantine report so they can see what's in their mailbox and what's getting caught. And it helps. So if there's some false positives in there, then we can create some rules to allow those to get through. Ideally, you're going to take the approach of most restrictive, and then eventually you start to open things up in a very systematic way versus just open the whole thing up, let everything through, because that's where you're asking for trouble. So it drives the users a little batty sometimes because all this stuff is getting stuck and they're trying to work. They think of ease of use. I have a job to get done, I have an email to get out, and I just want it to go. From the security side of things, we're thinking about how do we mitigate the risks to the organization, protect the intellectual property, the financials, any number of things that we're trying to mitigate. And sometimes those two will butt heads. So it's finding that sweet spot and knowing that it's not static.
Thanks, Jason.
That's kind of my long answer to your question. So let me go ahead and get my slides set up here. And then we'll, second, you can share this. And I think I have the order the wrong way. Give me a moment here. Let's change this over to here. Great. Is everybody seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So originally built, we've been working through variations of this material just based on what we're running into now, which in this case is we have a big telecommuting workforce. We have people permanently at home. You have companies like Salesforce that have said their staff's staying at home. They're just making that a permanent change. You have other organizations that are saying, and I have one of the guys that works for me, his wife has to go in the office 1 day a week. So she works from home 4 days a week. She goes in the office 1 day a week. People have varying policies for how they're having people work at home. And it has a big impact on security. So some of the standard stuff we're going to talk here also applies to the telecommuting workforce. Flip slides. There we go. We'll talk about security risk, phishing, of course, being the big issue of the day. We'll talk through some of the mechanics of that so that people understand it. Ideally, at the end of this, what my hope is that you're taking this material and in some form, you're regurgitating back to your employees to get them to turn their radar on, to get them to slow down, to get them to be skeptical and really take a look and say, why did I get that email that says do this wire transfer or go buy these Amazon cards or something like that? That's not how we do things. Let me go ask somebody that should be able to validate that for me. Putting in checks and balances. We've been involved in some wire transfer fraud issues. I've had to do the forensics on that. And yes, there's a breakdown when it comes to phishing, but there was also a breakdown on just practice. So a lot of these things that we look at, and I have a diagram in here that talks about it, but we can throw a whole bunch of technology at it, But if there isn't people worked into that process and the mechanics of here's how things should work in the organization, you can defeat security stuff easily. So it all works together. Here's the issues we had to deal with getting everybody home. Of course, this opens up a lot of interesting things in an environment, because now you have people working from home on their own hardware. You don't know what their connections are. You don't know what else is going on in the environment. So this really drives the reason to turn that alert level up even more, because they're not sitting inside your four walls protected by all your technology, which gives people a peace of mind. They're sitting out there protected by whatever they have at home, which is typically minimal at best. And they're connecting to your network to get data that's either financially important or intellectual property type stuff. So this is why we want to just really think through how we're doing things. This is the diagram I was talking about. When we think about security, we look at it from the perspective of different technologies that we're going to use: firewall, email filtering, desktop security. I would expect as nonprofits, you have these things in place today. You don't have to have a budget like a nationwide insurance or somebody like that to do just good, solid security, but you do have to make some investments. Now, the good news is in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of discount options. TechSoup is a great resource to be able to get a lot of these same things that in the corporate space, we're just paying a lot more for. So definitely take advantage of that. But you can see here at the top, we have people. So if you're not thinking about how people fit into your security practice, you're leaving a big hole for things to happen, because it just takes one person clicking on one email and things start to unravel. So it's just all these pieces working together, training happening on a regular basis, communicating the risk, making sure that if one person sees something that looks suspicious, they're telling other people in the organization that, hey, we saw this and it looks kind of odd. Ask the questions, because that's what's going to help uncover these risks that are coming in. And then on the backside of that, as you see new threats coming in, because they're constantly changing, it helps from a IT security perspective to be able to go back and say, we now have to apply these controls, or we have to change these practices so that we avoid this. The organizations that are going after your information are well-funded, well-structured. They know what they're doing, and they have tools and time to be able to just systematically go after organizations. As IT people, and Glenn, you can nod your head on this, we're having to run a lot of different things. We're dealing with email and phone systems and servers. The printer's not printing right now. The ISP is down or having issues. So all those things are going on in our world. So trying to stay on top of these issues sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of interesting reading in our space. Okay, so now this is in here. This was actually, we had partnered with Maloney Novotny and done a joint briefing down in Delaware a while ago. And they had pulled this slide in. If you notice, from a breach perspective, nonprofits are targeted. Sometimes people get comfortable, oh, we're small, we're a nonprofit that does this, we pump gas, so we do any number of things, but we're small. Why would anybody be interested in us? They don't necessarily care. They'll take the shotgun approach. We're going to blast out however many emails, 100,000 emails, and we're going to see who we hook. And occasionally they hook somebody big. There's some big dollars that have been compromised as a result of this. Sometimes they hook somebody that's not so big, but they still have them hooked. And then it's figuring out how to unhook and not have it be so messy. So the point here is, whatever industry you're in, you're a target. Some more interesting than others. If you look at things coming out of China, their APT-10 group over there, they're very targeted to go after biomedical and aerospace, things that are going to help propel the Chinese economy going forward. Organizations that are in Mexico and Eastern Europe and Russia, they're going after some of that too, but they're just going after whoever they can hook. So be wary. Now, I want to explain all of this, but the idea that people coming after organizations as somebody sitting in their basement in a hoodie is very far from the truth that we see today. These are well-structured organizations that are making millions of dollars a year doing their thing, even to the point of offering customer service. So when they hook you and it's time to unravel, you can call a number and say, okay, I need help to de-encrypt my data. And they'll help you do that if you pay them, which the recommendation is never pay them, because you encourage them, but you also don't know if you're going to get your data back. There's plenty of cases out there of people paying the ransom and the data just is gone. They never get it back, and they lost money for what they pay. So to prevent that, we're going to have some good strategies on the front end of it. We're going to apply good backup practices, good security practices. We're going to have policies that make sense in the organization. We're going to do continued education so that we take the gas out of what these guys are trying to do. Okay, this next slide, when people hear about the dark web and they go, well, what is the dark web? It's basically, you're not going to find it in Google. You can't search dark web. It's just known sites that you can go to. But what's important to keep in mind is stolen credentials go here. And you can see I'm just clicking through to get this on there. The amount of time for somebody to get a credential and to sell a credential is not that long. And you think about pieces of information that are valuable. So if you look at PHI, think of all the medical record information. Think about PII, which is going to be social security number, date of birth, address, who you work for, those types of things. If they can gather those things, there's a value for them, and there's a way to buy that information. I can buy passwords, I can buy user IDs. There's lots of things that I can buy to be able to piece together how I'm going to compromise an organization. So if I, as a hacker or an organization, set my targets on somebody, I can start searching through Facebook, through LinkedIn. There's a lot of things that you can learn from social media, and that's why we encourage people to just be a blank slate. Don't put anything out there. You know, the vanity tag. Don't hang a vanity tag on your business. This will just make it that much easier. But know all of this is going on. Questions thus far? Okay, so ransomware, we hear a lot about it, and it manifests itself in different ways. The easiest way to think about this is encryption of your business data to the point where it's not usable, and the only way you're getting it back is you're either paying, which is the FBI will tell you don't do that. We'll tell you the same thing. We're going to tell you to wipe and rebuild. And there's an example of Licking County back in 2017. County government got ransomware. They wanted $100,000 because they realized they hooked somebody pretty big. County said no, and they spent 2 weeks and $60,000 to put their county network back together. That is not a small effort when you think about. I think they had somewhere of 1,000 endpoints and a couple hundred servers that they had to put back together. That's just a Herculean effort to be able to do that. I don't know what precipitated that. I looked around and I didn't find what the cause was, but a lot of times it's email, people go on the wrong website, and then the party begins. Let's see. And now, so this one, so the thing we're seeing here with ransomware is not only if you don't pay will they delete your data, they'll put it out there for anybody to get their hands on. So you think about a business that does something that is very specific. It's their intellectual property, it's their designs. They have been ransomware. Now they're trying to get their content back, and they're trying to avoid their competitors getting their information. So even if we do a wipe and rebuild on the server, it does not mitigate that the data is already sitting out there somewhere that could be exposed at any time. So this is why the front end, the training, the reinforcement is so important. Here you can see Payoffs I was talking about before, cybercrime price list, and this comes from one of our partners that did some training with us over the summer. You can see the different values here. So for example, a credit card info that can be cloned onto a card, $10. 500 malicious email addresses, $400. Let's see,